fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I got another review. I know I've been going through silent films lately, and this is a really interesting film because it actually came out during the beginning of the sound era, but it plays like a silent film, and it's one I've always wanted to see, never got around to, but it's 1932's Vampyr. Directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer, or Dreyer. People say both. And what I mean by this was actually supposed to be one of the first sound vampire films. It was being made around the same time as Dracula, but it kept getting delayed, and it was actually released in 1932. Still the pre-code era, which is another one of my favorite eras of film. That, like, very beginning of sound before the rating system came in. Like, the Frederick March, Jekyll and Hyde was a movie that probably could not have been made later on in the 30s. This film is known for its very disorienting continuity, effects, just the whole look of the film, its story. It does play out kind of like a dream. It is surreal, but I wouldn't go as far as say it's as surreal as, say, Dr. Caligari, or even more modern films like Eraserhead. But it was a co-production between Germany and France. They're German and French filmmakers, and they were gonna dub the dialogue in both French, German, and English. And this was actually Dreyer's first. I keep going back and forth. I'll say Dreyer. Dreyer's first sound film. So it found it very difficult to get sound and also find a way to get all three languages. So what he did was he had the dialogue cut down to an absolute minimum, and most of the exposition that we get is all through inner titles, like a silent film. It comes from a book that the main character reads, so we get the exposition from that, text on the screen, and dialogue, which is very scarce throughout the whole film. Very short sentences between a couple characters, very scarcely throughout the film. So there's very little dialogue. There's no sound effects, but there is a score, so it feels like a silent film. Can't really call it that because it's not. There are voices, like when there's dialogue, but it's just they're all dubbed. It has a weird kind of fuzziness or like some sort of overlaying sound that it almost sounds kind of muffled, which adds to the sort of dream quality of the film. It also has, I want to see if I can find, it was written by Dreyer and Kristen Jewell, and it's based on some elements of J. Sheridan Le Fanu's 1872 collection of ghost stories called In a Glass Darkly. I've heard that title before. Most of the cast were not professional actors. Nicholas de Gunsberg starred in the film under the alias Julian West, which I believe he's the main character, Alan Gray. He's the guy that we follow throughout the whole film. I want to find the aspect ratio because I can't think of what it is, but it has like that lighthouse kind of like The Lighthouse that came out last year, like that square aspect ratio. I can't remember what it is now for the life of me, but it was filmed in that, and he had this sort of, it's kind of filtered through like a very like soft, it's got like this soft washed out kind of look. Like it all looks kind of fuzzy like this. Maybe not that harsh, but it makes it look more hazy, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So all these elements put together really feels like a surreal dream. Again, not to the extent of like the crazy German expressionists of Caligari or just the weird David Lynch-ness of Eraserhead. Another thing that was quite innovative that I didn't really think about until well into the film is sound films had only been around for 1 or 2 years. I mean, like the first sound horror film was Dracula and Frankenstein, came out the year before. So film was a new art form. And if you go back and watch silent films, the camera angles are all fixed. The camera hardly ever moves. It might pan, but the camera never really moves. This has a lot of tracking shots, and like we followed the main character through corridors and upstairs, and very innovative. And it feels more like a stream of consciousness, I guess, like a surreal stream of consciousness, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great experience. It's very short. I mean, 72 minutes. This does come with a 26 short film called The Mascot from 1934. It's a little stop motion about toys coming back to life. I didn't really get much into it, but I really liked Vampyr. It was well worth the wait. The story, I think a lot of it is up to interpretation because it does kind of go all over the place. Which first I will say, the reception that this got when it initially came out in 1932 and now is quite polarizing and also interesting because 1932, France, Germany, and in America, people were booing at the screen. They were demanding their money back. In one place, even a riot broke out, and police had to use their nightsticks on people. It really was a hated film. So, I mean, booing, riots, even nightsticks, demanding their money back. The director, Dreyer, actually suffered a mental breakdown after that. And he spent some time in a mental hospital. It was a financial failure. Nowadays, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 100%. I mean, that's as polar opposite as you can get. And I don't know how well this will show up, but this to me is one of the reasons why I love, again, it's not a silent film, but this and silent films because they're great visual experiences. When we do get the intertitles, it's like the old English calligraphy, kind of like the "There Will Be Blood" logo. And we follow this guy, Alan Gray, who he arrives at this inn at a Vampyr, so it's in France. He gets a room and he's waking up he's awoken by this old man who puts this parcel on his table. It says, to be opened upon my death. He walks outside, and these shadows guide him to... I think he hears like a child or something. And this character, Alan Gray, I don't know if it's the eyes, the slick back hair, the suit, or what, but he reminded me of H.P. Lovecraft. And maybe just the weirdness of the film itself. But, yeah, and we see these shadows, like these weird upside down angles of these shadows of people, like with sickles, like shadows are fighting. He ends up going to this castle where he finds this old man, and the shadows are dancing and fighting. It's unique to watch, especially with this fuzzy, hazy kind of filter. Again, with that boxed lighthouse aspect. He sees, he gets to the castle. He sees this elderly woman and encounters this other old man who I guess is the village doctor. He's one big mustache. He leaves the castle and he walks to a manor. He looks through one of the windows and he sees the lord of the manor, who is the same guy that left the package on his table. And then that guy is shot. And then they see Gray there. They ask him to stay the night. He opens the parcel, and it's a book about vampires. And that's where we get our exposition about the lore of vampires. A little different than, say, Dracula. And, well, at this point, the only other vampire films was like Dracula and Nosferatu. And Nosferatu was Dracula. You know, instead of a wooden stake, it's a metal bar. But I thought it was well written. It was like, you know, vampires are always in pain. Like, they need kind of, I guess, like the zombies from like the Return of the Living Dead series. They're in constant pain, their body, their soul. Vampires can sort of, Dracula did this as well, like command people with their gaze into submission. So we get all that through the intertitles. And there's a younger woman there named Giselle who tells Gray that her younger sister, is it Leona? Leona is very sick, and and she has wounds on her neck. And if you look up the original cover, you'll see a woman with like a look on her face. It's when she's kind of in this trance. It's like she's becoming a vampire. And it's like she's looking at her sister, almost kind of capturing her into that submission commanding gaze. It's kind of creepy. I mean, for unprofessional actors, that staring scene between the two women, I thought worked very well. I thought she looked really creepy, especially with the way the camera was, certain angles. Like, it's kind of down low and like kind of like the Stanley Kubrick staring through the eyebrows kind of look. I thought she looked really creepy. And then the other girl I thought did very well too. Like, her eyes were really big, watering up. looked like total terror on her face. That all worked well. um, and then basically the doctor convinces Gray that she needs a blood transfusion. Give his blood. He does. He gets weak and lightheaded. So he goes to sleep. And then he gets a sense that something's wrong. Rushes to the vampire girl. And he catches the doctor attempting to put poison in her. And a lot of people believe that, I guess, the vampire that's causing all of this is the doctor. And, using poison, I don't know. It's very loose as far as what happens. That is one of the drawbacks of the film. Is no matter how much you pay attention or how many times you watch it, either it's so open to interpretation or it's just very loose writing. It's more of a visual experience, really, than there is a story. But the visuals are very strong. And it is very slow-paced, which I also appreciate. It really takes advantage of being a visual experience. Even very long scenes of just following Gray around with the camera. But I like that. I love the look of it. And then after he sees the doctor trying to poison her, the doctor flees, and then Gray finds that the non-vampire sister, is gone. He follows the doctor back to the castle, and then he has a vision of himself being buried alive. Like, he sees himself as transparent, kind of like a ghost, which I thought the effect worked, the optical effect. And for me, one of my biggest fears is being buried alive. It creeps me out. And to that, I think that would be one of the scariest things to happen. And this whole dream sequence does it very well, because not only is it the casket that has a window over the face, but he's laying in there. You can tell he's got like white dead makeup, and his eyes are wide open. But we also see his vision through the window. People looking down at him. The coffin being carried outside. Kind of seeing the trees and the branches being lowered into the ground. Very effective. It really puts you in the casket. And if you have a fear of being buried alive, the scene will do it. So I thought that was very effective. And again, I don't even remember if there was a score to that particular scene. I was just so into what was going on. Because this is a very atmospheric, absorbing movie. That is definitely one huge plus that I can give it. But then when he gets out of that, he finds that the Giselle girl, the sister, he finds her. The doctor runs away. One of the servants finds Gray's vampire book, starts reading it. And that's when he reads that vampires can be stopped with an iron bar through the heart. So the servant takes Gray to this woman, Margaret Chopin, who is the elderly woman that we saw before. And they dig her grave out. She's perfectly preserved, but that also means she's a vampire. They drive the iron bar in, and for 1932, it's all implied, but it's still pretty gruesome. I mean, we don't actually see the bar like penetrating, but we see that they, with the hammer, they drive it in pretty deep. As that's happening, the doctor is hiding out in this old mill, and he ends up in this chamber where like flour gets dumped and stored, and the servant knows he's in there, and he activates the thing so it fills up with flour with him inside of it. So I think, because I've heard people say that the doctor is the vampire, but I think it's the Chopin woman, and I think the doctor is like her servant, because it did talk about how it can make them submissive and do their bidding. So that's what I think it is. So then we see, him he's in the room, can't get out, it's locked, it's a gate. Gets covered in flour, suffocates, and then Gray and Giselle, they're in like a little boat, and then they walk through this clearing, and the sun comes out. We see that Leona is recovered from her being a vampire, because she was like bedridden and sick, and now she says, I feel strong. But the curse has been lifted. And it ends with Gray and Giselle walking into the bright sunny clearing. And that's the end of the movie. And I have to say, even if the story doesn't really make sense, or maybe not, I know there will be people in the comments saying, well, it makes sense to me. I could tell what was going on before the opening credits were done. I know, it's the internet. But, this movie is known to be kind of nonsensical in the plot and story department. Be that as it may, this is one of those post-silent era kind of silent films that I really enjoyed. It's a great visual experience. It's very atmospheric. In fact, it's all atmosphere. I love that aspect ratio, just the box. It's like rounded off and fuzzy, whatever filter they use to make it washed out and fuzzy and hazy. The fact that there's no real sound effects, but there's a soft score. The way the camera follows the characters around, especially in the beginning when Gray hears like the calls of the night when he follows the shadows. It is this long sort of tracking shot, and it does create this sense of like a stream of consciousness. And it does have a very dreamlike quality to it. We don't really see it. If you want like a Dracula or Nosferatu type movie, it's not really that. We don't really see like a vampire doing vampire things. It's more so the effect of what vampires do to others, or making them vampires, and then what they have to, sort of like the side effects of what they have to live with, which is different. And I thought that was very interesting. If I want to see a vampire being a vampire, I can, from this era, I can go watch Dracula, I can go watch Nosferatu. So, yeah, I thought it was fine that they didn't show him like biting the neck or anything. But just for the visual experience alone, I would highly recommend it. Just know that it is very slow paced. And I like the idea of it kind of being a silent film out of necessity, because didn't really know, found it difficult to dub in all the different voices. So to just kind of dub it poorly and put in the subtitles, this must have been the first movie to have subtitles, because it's the old English, but there's like a black cutout around it, like the worst photoshopped subtitles. But I just add that to the list of oddities that make this movie very interesting and what makes it work. And for me, it was a fun experience. And, well, fun in the sense that I really enjoyed it. But it was very absorbing, and especially when Gray has the being buried alive sort of vision. It was really submersive in it. It really pulls you into its world, and really powerful movies can do that. And I thought this was one. I really enjoyed 1932's Vampyr. Highly recommend it if you're a fan of this era, silent or sound, old films in general, or just films that are a really different experience than anything else. Really dug Vampyr. I loved it. Thank you for watching.